60 Minutes Rewind.
The ivory-billed woodpecker is one of the most celebrated birds in U.S. history, a bird that, since pre-colonial times, has been an American superstar. Even though it's been presumed extinct for 60 years, thousands of birdwatchers never gave up searching for what they call the Lord God bird. So earlier this year, when it was disclosed that one ivory-billed woodpecker had been spotted in Arkansas, the reaction was extraordinary. You would have thought that a dinosaur had risen from the dead or that Elvis had returned. The ivory-bill's resurrection is an amazing story, not just about the bird, but the people who are obsessed with it. It's also a story involving extraordinary luck, secrecy, millions of dollars, and months of searching a forest in eastern Arkansas looking for a flying needle in a haystack. They call this the Big Woods, some 500,000 acres in Arkansas. It's what's left of a forest that once covered 24 million acres and stretched from Memphis, Tennessee to Little Rock. The spectacular swamps and hardwood forests of the South were once home to the ivory-billed woodpecker. Stories about the ivory-billed woodpecker go back to the days when only Native Americans were here. Some saw its skull as a symbol of power, the feathers as objects of beauty. In Victorian times, women prized those feathers for their hats. By the beginning of the last century, the bird had been nearly hunted to extinction. It was said to be so beautiful that when people saw it, they said, "Lord God, what a bird." The name stuck. The Lord God bird was the largest woodpecker in America. But for more than a half a century, about the only way you could see one was stuffed.
It's a huge black woodpecker, basically, with lightning bolts of white down the back and a huge patch of white on the wings.
John Fitzpatrick is the head of the Lab of Ornithology at Cornell University and one of this country's leading authorities on birds. Does it have a distinctive sound?
It does, actually. It has a sound that's been likened to a tin horn. It's a eek, 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 eek.
The first recording of that sound was made back in 1935 in Louisiana by a team of scientists from Cornell. They also filmed the first pictures of the bird. At the time, the Lord God bird was already on the verge of extinction. In the following decade, logging reduced its last known habitat to thousands of stumps.
This has been the symbol of what we did wrong. The complete annihilation of one of America's most treasured and spectacular pieces of land. We cut it all.
By the 1940s, the ivory-billed woodpecker was presumed extinct.
Ivory-bills are extinct. They've been extinct my entire life.
At least that's what Gene Sparling thought. In February 2004, Sparling, an outdoorsman from Hot Springs, Arkansas, went kayaking in the Big Woods. He took us close to the spot where he saw something he'll never forget.
A large woodpecker flew into the channel from above the canopy. He was headed straight towards me.
Sparling considered that it might be the smaller woodpecker that's common around here called the pileated, but he ruled that out.
I realized that if it was not a pileated, the only other alternative was for it to be an ivory-bill.
Sparling made a veiled reference to his sighting on the internet, and he got a response right away.
We came down, just a few days later, as quick as we could get out of town.
Tim Gallagher is a wildlife photographer and author from Cornell. Bobby Harrison, a college professor from Alabama. They're both ivory-billed hunters, bird watchers who have been looking for the bird for years, believing it's still alive. When they heard about his sighting, they immediately contacted Sparling, who took them near the spot where he saw the bird.
And then this bird just burst across in front of us at close range, about 65 feet away, and right in the sunlight, like a big open area like this. And it was just, I dropped my paddle and almost fell out of the canoe. It was like getting slapped in the face or something.
It turned on edge. We had a complete view of the back and both wings.
So at first you didn't think, this is an ivory-bill?
At that point, we both immediately knew what we were looking at. We've been at this for 30 years.
When it came out in front of us like that and we're just knocked back for it, I said something like, look at all the white on its wings, and then we just go, Ivory-Bill. And this bird was swinging up to land on the tree, and it goes, whoa. So we're scrambling along over fallen logs and branches.
I got tears in my eyes.
Right.
And
Tears in your eyes?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is...
We just saw an ivory-bill together, the first people in over 60 years to see a bird together.
As soon as Fitzpatrick was told of the sighting, he mapped out a search and strictly limited information about it.
Why did you need to keep it so quiet?
As I put it to the small group of people who'd heard about the story, if we just let this out right now, it's going to be Coney Island down there.
Fitzpatrick feared that announcing the discovery would attract bird watchers from all over.
Yeah, we're looking at the same one, Linda.
Bird watching has become an American phenomenon. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says it's the fastest growing recreational activity in the country.
You got the thrasher?
According to the government, 50 million Americans are bird watchers.
The Archilochus versus Calypti, ruby-throated, and Annas.
Thousands of people pack conventions and attend lectures on birding.
The D1 with the 50 millimeter on the zoom eyepiece.
Sales of birdwatching paraphernalia are up.
There you go.
From cameras and binoculars to high-tech digital field guides to books, making birdwatching a multi-billion-dollar industry in part because of this bird. The ivory-billed woodpecker was reportedly sighted in a federal wildlife refuge 120 miles long in eastern Arkansas. It's one of the most exotic and inhospitable environments in America. A vast primordial ooze, a place so wild that the Big Woods has been called this country's Amazon.
Boy, look at this, will you?
Yeah, it is absolutely spectacular.
It's home to 265 different species of birds, nearly a third of all the species that live in the U.S., and to a fantastic potpourri of wildlife, including cottonmouths, one of the deadliest snakes in America.
Welcome to Arkansas. Good morning.
A few weeks after the initial sighting, field biologists were recruited to spend 5 months in the Big Woods searching for something. But they weren't told it was the ivory-billed until they agreed to keep it secret. Scott Simon heads the Arkansas branch of the Nature Conservancy, which has helped preserve the forest where the ivory-billed was sighted. The Conservancy's job was to raise the money for the search without telling prospective donors what they were giving it for, unless they also agreed to keep it secret.
And that's the amazing part about this. I mean, a few people provided millions of dollars in private support for this without even confirmation of the bird because, you know, they so much were enamored by the story of hope.
A systematic search of the swamp began in March of 2004.
If you could actually come around the tree.
Some of the biologists were assigned to deploy listening devices on 24 trees throughout the forest.
This is Unit 11.
These devices record for weeks at a time, and then the audio is sent to Cornell for analysis. Other searchers played the 1935 recording of the ivory-bill's call, and then listened for an answer. They even put out decoys trying to draw the bird out. For months, searchers spent long hours in the swamp, waiting, watching, and listening. Last winter, a crane was brought in to get a bird's-eye view from above the treetops. Every day, up to 20 people went out, spending up to 14 hours in the swamp. Since they began a year and a half ago, searchers have spent 15,000 hours looking for the bird. The only picture of the ivory-billed woodpecker they say they got was a lucky shot taken from this canoe from a video camera 2 searchers had rigged to run continuously. Watch the area to the left above the oar handle. The bird's flight is visible for only 4 seconds.
I've looked at that video. How can you tell? I mean, how long does it last? It's like, whoop, it's gone.
It is, yeah, right.
How much can you tell from that?
Well, there are people who look at the video and they're basically scoffing at us saying, God, come on, it's a blurry video, what are you talking about? But the fact is there's information in that video, and as you know, you can actually learn a ton from just a few frames of video.
This is the video of the bird's flight, slowed down and magnified.
Right there Notice how much white there is on this wing without black on the back rim. We see a black wing-tipped bird that is largely white-winged from underneath. So a big woodpecker with a lot of white at the back edge of its wings and some white in the back can only be an ivory-billed woodpecker.
The story will continue after this.
It lives in the Big Woods region of eastern Arkansas.
Last April, 14 months after the search began and just before the news was about to leak, the searchers announced that the ivory-billed woodpecker had been rediscovered. It made the front page of newspapers all across the country. Virtually overnight, the bird became America's latest sensation. But some scientists weren't convinced that the video evidence is scientifically conclusive. So Cornell released audio evidence culled from some 18,000 hours of recordings in the Big Woods that may not be conclusive, but it believes is compelling.
This is an interesting sound recorded on January 29th in Arkansas, 2005.
Russ Sheriff, a researcher at the lab, played us a tape which he says bears a striking resemblance to two ivory-billed woodpeckers talking to each other. That sound has been music to the ears in Clarendon, Arkansas, the town closest to the sighting, which isn't waiting for the outcome of the scientific debate to cash in on the woodpecker's return. Clarendon now calls itself the home of the ivory-billed woodpecker. This year's annual birding festival was all about the bird. There were even ivory-bill haircuts at $25 a clip. But all that hoopla's not what matters to Fitzpatrick.
My whole life, I've been waiting, hoping, thinking, wondering if this thing existed.
Since February 2004, the ivory-billed woodpecker's existence has been confirmed. But the bird has remained elusive somewhere in the Big Woods. So far, only a handful of searchers have seen it. Fitzpatrick is not one of them.
I don't really get frustrated at that. I'm right now, I'd love to see this bird. I can't lie at all. I'm so glad that other people have. I mean, I've wept at stories of people describing it. It is an extremely emotional thing, this bird. I could happily go to my grave and not see it if we could find out what's going on and save it.